Hi friends! For those of you who don't know, my name is Chrissy, and today I'm going to show you how to sew one of these reversible beanies. This one has the navy blue fabric, and this other side is the light blue fabric. And if you'll notice the edges here, you can hardly even see any there's no raw edge there, it's just a closed seam. So, like any sewing project, the first step of this project is going to be fabric selection. And fabric selection here is key to success because when making a hat that's going to stretch over your very round three-dimensional skull, you're going to want a fabric that's got some stretch to it. So the fabrics that we have at Rock Tree Sky, I'll just show you some examples. One would be like the classic stretch knit. Your t-shirts are made out of this type of fabric. And it's stretchy. But the thing about stretch knit is that it's stretchier in one direction than the other direction. Like this direction, I'm not getting as much pull on the fabric, but in this direction, when I hold it like this, it can go for a while. So when we cut our fabric, we're going to want to make sure that we're cutting it in line with the knit, in line with the grain. That's called the grain of the fabric. So this is one option, a stretch knit. Another option that we have here is a fleece fabric. Now these fleece fabrics are super soft and cozy, malosy, fee-fo-fo-fosy, and they also have a lot of stretch to them. These fleece fabrics, once again, there's one side that's like not really as stretchy. There's another way where it's like, you can go for days, stretch for days with the fleece fabric. We've got some of this. This one's called ribbed knitting. You might have like tank tops or something that are out of this one. And this is a great fabric because you can really see like the lines of the knit. So with this one, it's easy to tell that it's going to stretch more this way than it is this way. It's like, you know, it's a little bit of give, but not a lot of stretch. So for this hat that I'm making today, I'm going to use some more classic knit fabrics, also known as like a jersey fabric. This green one, which is real soft, and I'm going to make an attempt to hold it up to the camera so that you can see the lines in the knit, because you want to make sure that those lines are going vertical to the hat, to the template, when you cut the fabric. You can kind of see that there are some lines going up and down means vertical. Vertical means up and down. And that's, so you're going to want the bottom and the top of the hat to be lined up to that up and down. This fabric is luxurious. This one's like real soft and fuzzy right here. And then the other side is like a little bit more, not quite as soft. So when sewing this hat, I'm going to be sure that I want this soft side to be the side that touches my skin. And I'm going to have this other side be the wrong side of the fabric. That's the other thing that we need to consider when we prepare to cut our fabric, is which side of the fabric is the right side and which side is the wrong side. We use these terms a lot in sewing, matching up the right sides of the fabric. The right side means the side that the seams are going to be not visible. So the wrong side is the side where the seams are. Just like, I'm just going to show you like on my sweater here. So on my sweater, this where the seam is visible, that's like the wrong side of the fabric. Where the seam is more invisible and you don't, I mean, you see the line there, but you don't see like how it's put together. Those two sides of the fabric are the right sides. I don't know if that helps to clarify for you. So now that we've selected our fabric, like I said, I'm going to use this fuzzy gray and this forest green. The next step is to cut the fabric. And we have this right here is a pattern, also known as a template. And I'm gonna use this as a tool for cutting out the fabric. Now, I'm gonna want to cut 4 separate pieces of fabric I'm gonna want 2 of the green and 2 of the gray, because think about it, when making a hat, one side is the front. So what you're seeing here, that's one piece of fabric is the front, one piece is the back, and then since this one's lined, there's 2 more pieces of fabric. There's one side which is the front of the inside, one side which is the front or the back of the inside. So we're going to need 4 pieces of fabric that are the same size and shape. So to do that, you can prepare by laying out your fabric and setting the template over the fabric. One pro tip would be to use a paper template, which can be folded in half, and then when you're cutting, you can cut along the fold. So what I've done right here is I've folded the fabric and I've folded the pattern, and I've matched up the folded edge of the fabric with the folded end of the pattern. And I stuck this little weighted bean bag on top of the pattern so it doesn't move around while I'm cutting it. I'm going to cut out this piece using a rotary cutter. Okay, there's the blade. Blade is out. Now to cut, I'm going to be sure to put my hand down on top of the pattern piece, and I'm always going to cut away from me. So I'm pressing the rotary cutter onto the mat, just pressing in and following the edge of the template and cutting all the way around in one smooth cut. I'm going to tuck my blade back in. And then pull out the pattern piece, the fabric piece. So now there's one of 4. I'm going to do the same thing for the other green one. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to set up my pattern piece right here. Also notice that I'm cutting along the very, very edge of the fabric. I'm not cutting a hole right in the middle of this big piece of fabric. I'm cutting along the edge. That way it maximizes the amount of fabric that we have so that other people can enjoy using the fabric for other projects. It's kind of a bummer when I go to find a piece of fabric and there's just like a giant hole cut in the middle of it because one person made one beanie, and then like the rest of the fabric just becomes kind of scrappy. But now there's just this like one little bit of scrap, and then the rest of this fabric is still a functional piece. All right, I'm going to set that off to the side. So there's me. I just showed you how to cut using a rotary cutter. I'm also going to do, when I cut the gray pieces, I'll use scissors so that you can see another method for cutting if a rotary cutter is not available to you. Another very important thing about the rotary cutter is that you always want to be cutting it on a cutting mat. You never want to use the rotary cutter on a wooden table or any other surface, or like a carpet. You always want to use a cutting mat. Notice that with the green pieces and the way that I laid them out, it's stretching the most side to side, least amount of stretch up and down. Okay? And I want to make sure that I do the same thing with this gray fabric, so I'm going to test it as I lay it out. Okay, it stretches a lot like that, so that's going to be my horizontal, and I'm going to lay down the pattern. Yeah, I'll show you. There's a line on the pattern, up and down. I'm going to match up the arrows with the direction of the fabric right here. I'm also matching up the pattern piece with the edge of the fabric. So that way it's less that I need to cut, right? Let me use this tool again. And I'm going to show you, it's just as possible to do with scissors. It takes a little bit more time and a little bit more patience maybe with scissors, but it's possible. I like to keep the bottom blade of the scissor flat on the table. And I'm just making little cuts. Okay? So there's one gray piece. And now, just to show you that it's possible, I could cut the whole pattern piece out at a time rather than cutting it on the fold. That's also a possibility. But in the interest of time and also in the interest of symmetry, I'm going to cut it on the fold. Okay, so now we're going to get into the sewing. So this is where the right sides versus the wrong sides of the fabric is very important. I'm going to show you first with the gray one because on this one it's so easy to tell which side is clearly the right side, this fuzzy soft side, versus the wrong side, which it looks a little bit darker and it's definitely not as fuzzy. So to prepare for sewing, I'm going to lay out the pieces and I'm going to match them up so that the right sides of them, that's the fuzzy sides of them, are together, just one on top of the other. I'm doing it on the table and then I'll pick it up and show you what I've done. Okay, so I've matched them up so that all of the raw edges, those are the edges which have been cut, all of the raw edges are matched up and the fuzzy sides, the right sides, are together. And now I'm going to sew. I am using a white thread today because that way you'll be able to see it when I hold it up. I'm also going to do about a 1/2 inch seam on the fabric. So that means that there's going to be like a 1/2 inch from where the needle is and where the thread is going to the raw edge of the fabric. So I just lowered down my presser foot. I'm going to lower down the needle. I'm going to start with a back stitch because you always start and end with a back stitch. And I'm going to stitch all the way around the edges of this fabric. But I'm not going to sew the, I'll show you. I'm not going to sew this bottom edge because that's where my head needs to go. And if I close that up, then this is not going to be a hat. My head's not going to be able to get in there. I'm only sewing around the arch of the hat. I'm only sewing the rounded edge, not the straight line, not the opening. Okay. Just doing a straight line stitch, just a straight stitch. And as I sew, you see I'm using my fingers just to like really gently steer the fabric. I'm not yanking it, but my fingers are just really lightly steering it. Okay, now I'm going to pull the fabric off. I'm going to snip those threads. I'm going to snip these other threads. Okay, so there. 1/2 of the hat is now done. And if you want to stop here just by flipping the hat right side out and putting it on your head, calling it a day, you can do that. That's a choice. But if you're in this to make the lined beanie, continue watching, follow along with me. You're almost there. You're halfway there. Okay, I'm going to set this off to the side. I'm going to do the same thing with the green ones. Something that I didn't show you before with the gray is pinning. And that was really because the gray fabric, like I said, there's so much static friction with the fuzzy side of that I didn't really feel like pins were necessary. With this green one too, I feel confident in my skills that I don't need to pin it, but if you wanted to pin it, you would just take the pin, hold it by the head of the pin, stick the pointy end in to the fabric, and then back out of the fabric. And then that kind of pins it and it holds the fabric in place. I do recommend a few pins so that way it doesn't slip around on you and come out of line. I'm zooming in again to show you the sewing of the green section. Once again, got about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, starting with the back stitch and going. I'm going to take out the pins now because the pins are still in there. I'm going to zoom out so you can see who's talking to you. Hey, it's still me. And I don't even know where the pin cushion is. Just put the pins right here. Okie dokie. So now I'll flip this right side out. So there. Now I've either made 2 hats, but you know I'm making 1 hat. I'm going to put these together. If I did want to stop here at just 1 hat, it would be totally a-okay to leave the edge raw. It's not going to fray too much because it's a knit fabric. If I was interested in making a hem, I could do that by, I'll turn it back inside out, and then just folding up the bottom like about 1/4 of an inch, like that, and I could sew just along that line, or I could flip it. I probably would flip it twice so that all raw edges are tucked in and that the hem is like that. It's tucked up to the inside there. And then I would place this on the machine like so and just sew along that line right there. That's how I would do it if I was going to hem this hat. But like I said, I've got other goals here. So I'll show you. So remember, this hat, it's got this, it's reversible, and I can't even see any raw edges there. And when I first took a look at this, I was like, Diane, how did you do it? And then I studied it a bit more and I figured it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew it, and at the end we're going to have to hand sew it because we're going to make a little tiny little bit of a hole so that we'll be able to flip it back inside out because we're going to sew it, right side out, because we're going to sew it together inside out. So that means I need to think for a second. So I want this fuzzy side to be the side that touches my head, right? And I want the green side that doesn't have this big obvious seam facing outward. I want this side facing outward. Okay, so remember, the goal is to make a lined hat. And so what I'm going to do is, this is where those right and wrong sides are so crucial. I made this kind of half-done example earlier to remind me of how to match up the sides. And I'm going to leave this by the sewing station at Rock Tree Sky so that you can see it. I'm a really visual learner, so I need to see something like this to wrap my head around how to do the next step. But the next step is basically sliding the outside piece, which is the green piece, into the inside piece, which is this gray fuzzy piece, with the right sides matched up to each other. So see how these seam lines are matched up to each other and the right sides of the fabric are matched up to each other, and now these raw edges are matched up together all around the edge of the hat, the opening of the hat, matching up the seams, matching up all these raw edges. And I'm gonna sew it just like that. I'm not gonna sew all the way around it though, because then because ultimately I wanna flip it inside out, or I wanna flip it right side out again so that the right sides are facing out. I'm sewing it inside out. All right, so once again, with about a 1/2 inch seam, I'm gonna put this down on the machine. I'm gonna sew almost all the way around, stopping when there's about 2 inches left to sew. Stopping with a 2-inch opening. To sew this all the way around, I'm gonna kind of slide it over the machine like that, kind of like putting a sock onto the machine or putting a hat onto the machine, because I am putting a hat onto the machine. Okay, I'm gonna lower down the needle and the presser foot. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I stopped there because I left about like a good maybe 2.5 inches of an opening. so that I can open it up like that, stick my hand in there, and pull the hat out. Voila! Now it's got a mouth. Just kidding, it's not a mouth. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just get a needle and thread, and I'm gonna hand sew this part together so that there's not that open mouth, and instead it's all closed. Okay, I'm about ready to hand sew. I found this great green thread that's about the same color as the hat. I'm going to thread this needle by just poking the thread through the eye of the needle. Come on, there it goes. Big knot at the end of the thread. And then I'm going to take my hat, I'm going to kind of tuck in those edges, and I'm going to stick the needle in through one side and then the other side, and just pull it on through. On one side and the other side, and just pull it on through. It's just, the goal for me is to try to make this stitch as invisible as I can. To finish the stitching, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide the needle in and then pull through, and then I'm going to create kind of a loop with the thread. You can see that there, how it's a loop. And I'm going to feed the needle through and pull it tight, like just like tying any old type of knot. And then I'm going to trim the thread. And that is that. I'm going to tuck the fuzzy end back into the green side. And that is the finished hat. All right, so now the hat is finished, and this hat was actually a holiday gift for my friend Farmer Kelly. So Kelly's going to model the hat for us.
I'm so excited.
All right, Kelly, tell us what you think.
Oh, I feel so cozy in my new hat. Thanks, Chrissy.
You're welcome. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.